Hi everybody, my name is Melody and welcome to my YouTube channel. I thought long and hard about what I wanted my first sit down YouTube video to be about, and I decided to just go for it. I would like to also share my own faith journey to the point to where I am today. I'll start with my childhood. I actually grew up going to church. My mom was the mom that if we were in the same house, if you were a guest, if you were her child, whoever you were, if you were in her house on Sunday morning, you were going to church early, no sleeping in. We would all, no matter what, make sure that we were in church for service, ready, dressed in our Sunday's best. And that was routine. I genuinely enjoyed going to church. I loved children's Sunday school. I loved the Bible studies that we would have, learning about the life of Moses, Samson, and just all these Bible stories that I can recall from a very young age. On television, we would even watch VeggieTales, whoever is familiar with that. I would also just say that I would be excited to connect with other people, who are my age, other kids who were interested in God, but also just to socialize. I found church to be a place to make wonderful friendships. Eventually, my mom actually decided that we would no longer be going to the church that we were going to. So all of those periods of time where I would socialize a bit, although I was naturally introverted, a bit disappointed that things would be changing in that sense for me. And I would say that we changed churches. I was maybe it's between the ages of 13 and 15, around that time. And I was shocked. My siblings were shocked, and we just didn't really know what was going on. The new church that we were going to from that point on was quite different. I noticed that there was more of an emphasis on what you would wear. There was more of an emphasis on not wearing jewelry, flashy makeup, and things of that nature. And that was something that I wasn't really used to. In all honesty, I didn't like the new environment that we were in. Just wanted things to go back to the way that they were before. And I did tell my mom the way that I felt about it. And looking back at everything, I want to put out there that my mom is the best mom. And I know a lot of people say that about their mom, but for real, she's the best. She's given up a lot for me to have the things that I do today. She's the reason that I was introduced to who Christ was. And I don't fault her for the way that I was feeling back then. And she has always meant well, and she does mean well. So with that, I'm going to be true to my testimony. Okay, I'm going to be true to my story and who I am and who God has created me to be. Moving on to the new environment, overall, I felt isolated. I noticed that there weren't as many people who were my age, which made me feel like, oh, well, even if I did feel open enough to share with others how I was feeling in the new environment, there weren't that many other people around me, a youth group, I guess you would say, or a children's group at that point in my life where I felt like that was possible. I would just say isolated. That's how I felt. I felt isolated during that period of time in my life. I want to backtrack a little bit to how elementary school was for me, and then moving on to middle school, the time that we moved to the new church. So in elementary school, I was, again, pretty introverted, however, extroverted when I felt like I would get comfortable with somebody and get to know them. My sister went to the same elementary school as me. She's a few years older than me. So we were in elementary school for a good amount of years together. Like, I want to say at least like 4. Yeah, until she went on to middle school. So she's the person that I would oftentimes like lean on. And she's the person that, if anything, would go and fight my battles for me. Just kidding. But at the same time, no, like she would really step up to people if somebody was messing with me. So I found a lot of comfort in that. Outside of that, other than a close friend that I lost contact with later on, I would pretty much keep to myself. And I think that because I was one of the few Black people who went to my elementary school, I oftentimes just felt like I didn't have as many similarities between myself that I was noticing with my other classmates. Left me feeling left out, kind of like an outsider. Many people in my elementary school were bilingual, where I was not. So I think that I would just find myself seeking, hey, like, what are some things that I can find in common? What are some things that I can talk about? When I would see my classmates get together and have these conversations, sometimes it was very difficult for me to connect with the points that would be brought up. I think that I just found it difficult to connect. So a lot of the things that I started to associate with identity and what it meant to belong, it had to do with, do we have a similar background? Do we speak the same languages? And overall, even the way that I saw beauty, it was shaped around what I was surrounded with a lot of times in school, because we spend so much time in school, right? So while I did feel this way in school, the first church that I grew up going to, that was a place that, because I did know people and I had cultivated some friendships there, that I felt like that was a space that I could really come out of my shell and just be who I am, or start to figure out who I am. I felt comfortable in that space. After I was taken out of that space, I was no longer feeling that way. Moving on to middle school. Middle school for me, I actually found that that same feeling of not belonging and that same feeling of, seeking for who I am, trying to find who I am, feeling like I didn't belong kind of followed me, to middle school. And outside of the personal relationship slash social scene, I was pretty involved. I was in band. I played the flute. Shout out to my flute players if you played the flute before, or just any instrument. And I loved participating in band concerts. I was an overachiever in a sense. I had a genuine love for reading for pleasure, not just for classes. All of the academic accolades, I wanted to be academically the best that I could be. All of those things that I described about myself were as well true when I was in elementary school. My parents didn't play about school, so I didn't play about my grades, okay? Touching on, the friendship piece of things and the personal relationship piece of things, I was hoping and seeking for close friendships. However, I guess like a caveat for me, although I was in middle school and I was happy that I was in a way starting this new chapter in my life, I noticed that I lived on a completely different side of town than most of my other classmates were. So basically, whenever people would have kind of like after school get-togethers, whether that be at the mall or like, hey, I'm having this birthday party, or hey, we're all meeting up at, there was this wing spot that everybody would go to that had banging food. Like the food was, from what I heard, amazing. But oftentimes I wouldn't be able to go and meet up at those get-togethers or, hangouts. I wouldn't be able to go to those because that would require my parents to come from a completely different side of town, which if traffic was enough, it could very well, take up, if the traffic was that bad, I want to say 45 minutes to an hour. Whereas other people in the neighborhood, it might take them, 15, 20 minutes to get to their house, depending on where they lived, from the different, mall hangout events that they would have. So overall, it would be difficult for my parents to finish work and then come and get me for the social events. So that was number one. Number two, they were strict anyway, so they didn't see the purpose in me, participating in those type of things. Read your book and go to sleep. And that was it. That was very much their energy. They just didn't want me to get distracted by the wrong things, which I can appreciate being older now. But back then, I just felt left out. I would often get teased for the type of shoes and the type of clothes that I would wear at that time. A lot of people, they would be very much up with the trends, the trendy shoes, but I was still on my Mary Janes, which is funny because I've seen that Mary Janes have come back into style. But back then, oh yeah, I was an OG Mary Jane wearer, and I would often get teased for that. And I remember even the way that I would wear my hair. A lot of people would, straighten their hair, just the hairstyles that were like very trendy. But I don't think that I reflected what was trendy back then. I think also because I was introverted, many people just viewed me as somebody who wasn't very sociable. I think that all of these factors taken together left me just in silence and not really wanting to speak to anybody about what was going on internally in my life. So that feeling of isolation, it wasn't just about the social side of things. It was also about the fact that during this time, there was some friction within my home life. disagreements over the topic of religion. I felt I'm the only one who's experiencing the specific things that I'm experiencing. I'm the only one who's attending a church where I feel like, even though we're supposed to be gathering to worship the Lord and praise his name, I'm feeling very unseen and I'm feeling very uncomfortable. Like I'm in a very unfamiliar environment that I didn't choose to be in the first place. And on top of that, I ain't got no friends. Like I don't have any friends at school. Exactly what I was feeling at that moment. And I think that with all the emotions I was having, I don't even think that I had the words to describe what I was feeling, why I was feeling it. So, moving on to high school. So, wow, high school was the time for me to finally break out of my shell and finally become who I was, supposed to be socially. Be somebody who was able to appear more extroverted and socialize more. Despite me having all of the experiences that I had with church, just forget about that and leave all of that behind and just focus on who is my crowd, who are my people, how can I fit in? That was what I saw high school as. Interesting enough, I did actually make a couple of close friends at the time. And I started to feel like I did kind of start to learn and discover what my social groove was and who my crowd was. However, with that, I still felt lonely. I still felt like I didn't have people to lean on. I know that a lot of people assume that when you have a child who feels lonely and they just feel like they don't know who they are, that is because their parents didn't love them. I've heard people say that before, but in fact, my parents love me very much. My parents have always made an effort to show me how much they love me and how much they care, and they still do. Shout out to you, mom and dad. So I knew that it didn't have to do with that. I knew that there was something more for why I was feeling the way that I was, even though I couldn't exactly put my finger on it, right? So, again, that same feeling of not belonging and that same feeling of being an outsider from elementary school through middle school and then now in high school, or I should say back then in high school, it went with me, it followed me through that point. Around my high school graduation, my older sister had introduced me to a new church community. I was happy that we were now attending this new church where I genuinely did feel welcome. A really large pillar is what they called it. One of the largest pillars of the church was family. The idea of bringing families together and reconciling families. I wasn't able to continue routinely attending the church because soon after that point, moved for college. And although my college campus wasn't that far from the church, it was maybe half an hour drive. I wasn't driving at that point in my life. So it was difficult for me to make it to the regular Sunday services since I didn't have a car. So I was free. I moved for college, again, starting a new chapter in my life, saying goodbye from my parents for a short period of time. And, I was living on my own for the first time. I did have roommates. However, a lot of you who are in college or who have graduated from college probably know that even if you have roommates, being in your own dorm can be like living on your own, if you know what I mean, being outside of your parents' home. So I overall had a new level of freedom, a newfound freedom that I had never had before. And I took advantage, okay? I would go to parties and not saying I would go to the wildest parties, but if my friends would invite me, hey, there's this party that my friend invited me to. Do you want to come? And there was food. Oh, I was going to be there. Now, before I go further into that, just giving a glimpse into my mindset coming into college. Yes, I was so excited about this newfound freedom. I was happy to get away from the house, be outside of the house for the first time ever. But I was still very much academically driven. I was not someone who just like went to college and just said that I'm going to forget everything that I had worked for up until that moment. No, I still wanted to maintain my grades because part of the way that I measured my worth, to be honest, was how well I was doing in school. Woo, that's a lot of talking. As far as the conversation of dating went, wasn't interested in dating. My mindset was very much, I'm going to get in, do my thing, and get out. That was my goal, and graduate with my degree. So little did I know, socially, I would get distracted. And that brings me back to the conversation of what crowd I would associate myself with. They were into things that I wasn't as much into, and that included drinking, smoking, whole nine. Not to say that was everybody, although I wouldn't be initiating a lot of those activities that were going on. Just being in that environment itself, it affected me, and it was difficult to put into words why it would affect me. I think a lot of us can agree to the impact that music can have on the way that you're feeling. Kind of like if you play like a song about fighting and going to find your enemy and getting them, versus playing something like Shine, Jesus, shine. You know what I mean? Like the difference between those two different vibes can just impact your soul. And imagine just kind of having your playlist filled with music that is speaking, those words in the first example versus the second one, and how you would overall feel throughout your day. And that is the way that I would describe it. Almost kind of like my soul was becoming dark because of what I was surrounding myself with. I felt the darkening of something inside of me because of what I was surrounding myself with, because of the words that were being spoken over me and within my presence, and the words that I was seeing come out of other people's mouth, or I should say hearing and seeing come out of people's mouths towards others. All of those things were having impact on me, even though I didn't know it at the time. And eventually, when certain friends would invite me out, I would kind of just make up excuses or give a reason as to why that I couldn't go, because I just wasn't comfortable. The Holy Spirit convicting me not to be in those places back then. I just knew it didn't feel good to be there. I remember there was this one event. It was kind of like, I think it might have been homecoming related. It was either homecoming related or like an event that they threw for like end of semester coming up. I stopped dancing because, I would dance with friends, and I took a moment to rest, took a moment to look around the faces of the people that were there, and nobody was happy. The facial expression and the energy and just the feeling that I would imagine to come into a room of somebody who had pure joy. When I looked around the room, nobody had that expression on their face. And I knew that I didn't either. I just felt like nobody in that room was happy, seemed joyful, genuinely joyful. And I don't mean momentary happiness that comes from, oh, you drank and you feel like you're having a great time. But I'm talking about lasting joy, because I believe that that's a large difference between happiness and joy. I've heard a mentor in my life say that before, that the difference between happiness and joy can be that happiness is momentary, whereas joy is lasting. And Greek life was very prevalent, and it seemed like at one point, for you to be like socially relevant, you should involve yourself in Greek life. That's how you become more known in the college community. I wasn't ever actually interested in pledging. I would have friends that would ask me about it, but I wasn't interested. And that's not to say that I have something against people who would, but that just wasn't something that I chose for myself. There was a church community that was closer to my college campus that I was able to go to. Very kind people, again, very welcoming. I would sometimes go and sometimes I wouldn't, maybe because I might spend the Sunday doing homework instead of going to service. However, I went there frequently enough for people to recognize me. And there were also even students who would drive me to church who had, I believe, introduced me to that church at that time. I think that they were part of the reason that I started going. Thank God for their lives, people who were helpers. Now that I look back along the way, although I would feel good, going to service, they often say that it's the Monday through Saturday that is really kind of, what are you doing during that time? You know what I mean? Outside of church, what are you doing with that time? And with that time, I was trying to find all these different things to fill me, to make me feel fulfilled. And that included academic accolades, trying to be the highest achiever that I possibly could, trying to people please so that I would fit in and I would feel like people liked me. And on the note of liking or not liking people, I feel like I was trying to become a version of myself that people would just like. And now that I look back, I don't even know who that was. But, and I think that because I didn't know what exactly that even looked like, it made me feel even more confused about my identity than I even came into college feeling. Even after doing, all of these things to feel like I finally fit in, I just found myself going to sleep at night feeling empty. I felt empty, like there was this hole or something. And again, I couldn't exactly put my finger on what it was. So, really big turning point for me in my life and in college, it was the pandemic. Suddenly I was on campus and then I wasn't. One day I was in the library meeting up with friends and, gisting, foolering with the foolery until I wasn't. And I really took a step back, sitting in my room, sitting in my bedroom. This was at the point where they had announced that everybody was on lockdown. I said, what am I doing? I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, what have I been doing? Who am I? What is the purpose of the way that I've been going about life? And what is my purpose? At that point seemed kind of like existential crisis questions, but little did I know, um, God was starting to do a work in me. I started clicking on sermons. For those of you who may or may not remember, churches were going virtual. The church that was even close to my college campus, I think they were still meeting in person for some time, but I services as well. I wasn't getting, that feel good in person experience that some may be able to relate to. Those are the topics that would often speak to me the most, since I was trying to figure out what was next for me and talking to God more and praying more. And when I say praying, I don't just mean the Lord's Prayer. Of course, that's a wonderful prayer. Saying, God, this is how I've been feeling. God, this is what I've been dealing with. God, this is what I'm struggling with. I need your help. Those are the kind of prayers that I was praying, almost like he was another person, like sitting in the room with me. And there were scriptures that so many times before that seemed kind of like love is patient, love is kind, or seek ye first the kingdom. Those are words that I knew from the Bible that I had heard before, but God began to peel back and reveal meanings of the words that I had almost kind of like just taken for granted before. And he started to give me a deeper understanding of what it actually meant. Seek ye first the kingdom. I really had almost kind of like a eureka moment. That eureka moment where things start to make more sense. That was the moment that I had. I started to realize that I hadn't been seeking God first. I'd been seeking approval, validation from others. I've been seeking fulfillment from feeling beautiful enough, from feeling like people like me enough. Everything except for God. I wanted my own definition of glory and riches to be added onto my life, my own definition, whether that mean a large friend group, whether that mean I finally reached the point where I feel accepted by so many people that I don't even have contact with today anymore. I wanted what I saw, what other people had that seemed like was making them happy, when in reality, it wasn't until later that I realized that God accepts me. Today, my fulfillment comes from pursuing God and knowing God more. I realized it was never about finding enough material things or brief moments of momentary happiness to fill me up. I realized it's walking in the path that God has set for my life. I just want to encourage anyone who's watching right now, if you've ever felt like you're not good enough, if you've ever felt unseen, if there's more that you'd like to see from me in my journey, stay tuned, and thank you for watching. God loves you.